The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty saloon, and Lillian Nash pressed her gloved hand against the window, her stomach dropping at the sight before her. Empire City, Nevada, was nothing more than a collection of weathered wooden buildings surrounded by endless desert, without a single marble column or crystal chandelier in sight. She had traveled from Boston for 3 long weeks, enduring dust storms, terrible food, and cramped quarters, all because the letters from Nathan Rivers had painted a picture of prosperity and comfort. He had written about his ranch, his success with cattle, his spacious home with multiple bedrooms and a wraparound porch. He had sent a photograph showing a handsome man in fine clothes standing before an impressive building. Now, stepping down from the stagecoach in her traveling dress of deep burgundy silk, her carefully styled blonde hair already coming loose from its pins, Lillian wondered if she had been an utter fool. The year was 1882, and Nevada was still largely untamed despite the silver mines bringing some civilization to certain areas. Empire City existed primarily as a waypoint for ranchers and miners, a place to get supplies, drink away earnings, and occasionally find trouble. The main street consisted of perhaps 20 buildings total, and the wind kicked up dust devils that danced between them like mischievous spirits. "Miss Nash," a deep voice called out, hesitant and rough around the edges. Lillian turned to see a man approaching, and her breath caught in her throat for entirely different reasons than she expected. He was tall, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. But his clothes told the real story. Worn denim trousers patched at one knee, a faded blue shirt that had seen better days, scuffed boots, and a hat with a distinct crease where it had been crushed and reformed. This was not the prosperous rancher from the photograph, Mr. Rivers. She asked, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Yes, madam, Nathan Rivers. I'm real pleased you made it safely." He reached for her trunk, but she stepped in front of it. "Before we go any further, perhaps you could explain the discrepancy between your letters and the reality I'm observing." Nathan's face flushed red beneath his tan. He removed his hat and twisted it in his hands, a gesture that would have been endearing if Lillian were not so furious. "I can explain, Miss Nash. I promise I can. But maybe we should get you out of this sun first. You've been traveling a long time, and I imagine you're tired and thirsty. What I am is deceived." Lillian crossed her arms over her chest, aware that people were beginning to stare from the saloon windows and the general store across the street. "That photograph you sent, the descriptions in your letters, were they complete fabrications?" "Not complete fabrications, exactly." Nathan shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "That was my father's ranch in the photograph. It was supposed to be mine. Things changed after I sent that picture. My father, he passed suddenly, and it turned out he had debts I didn't know about. The bank took the main house and most of the land. I managed to keep a small piece, enough for a cabin and a modest herd, but it ain't, it is not, what I promised you." Lillian felt her anger waver slightly at the genuine regret in his voice, but she held firm. "You should have written to me immediately and told me the truth. You should have released me from our agreement. You're right, I should have." Nathan met her eyes directly, and she saw something there that surprised her, not just regret, but desperation tinged with hope. "I was selfish. By the time everything with the estate was settled, I'd been writing to you for months. I knew you, or at least I felt like I did. Your letters were the only bright thing in my days. The thought of writing to tell you not to come, of never meeting you in person, I could not do it. I know that makes me a coward and a liar, and if you want to get right back on that stage tomorrow when it comes through, I will pay your fare back to Boston. but I'm asking you to at least give me a chance to show you that even though I do not have the wealth I promised, I can still give you a good life." The stagecoach driver cleared his throat. "Miss, I need to get moving. You staying or going?" Lillian looked at Nathan, then at the dusty street, then back at Nathan. Every rational part of her brain screamed that she should leave immediately. She had left Boston to escape the suffocating expectations of her aunt and uncle, who had raised her after her parents died and wanted her to marry their business associate, a man of 60 with wandering hands and stale breath. She had dreamed of adventure, yes, but also security. A comfortable home. Stability. But she had also written in her letters to Nathan about wanting something real, something more than the artificial politeness of Boston society. She had confessed her love of reading, her secret desire to learn to ride horses, her longing to see wide open spaces. He had responded with warmth and what seemed like genuine understanding. If that part had been real, even if the material circumstances were false, perhaps there was something here worth discovering. "I will stay for 1 week," she announced, lifting her chin. "During that time, you will show me your actual circumstances, and I will decide if this is a life I can accept. If at the end of that week I choose to leave, you will indeed pay my fare home and we will part ways with no hard feelings. Do we have an agreement?" Relief flooded Nathan's face. "Yes, madam, we absolutely have an agreement." He loaded her trunk into the back of a simple wagon hitched to 2 horses that looked well cared for despite their lack of fine breeding. At least he treated his animals properly, Lillian noted. That said something about a man's character. She accepted his hand to climb up onto the wagon seat, very aware of the strength in his calloused fingers and the care he took to ensure she was settled before releasing her. The ride out to his property took about 40 minutes, and Nathan filled the time with information about the area. He pointed out landmarks, explained the water situation, and introduced her to the reality of ranching in Nevada's high desert. His voice carried genuine passion when he spoke about the land, even if that land was not as extensive as he had originally claimed. "You miss it?" Lillian asked as they crested a small rise. "Your father's ranch, I mean, the life you had before." Nathan was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses down the slope with practiced ease. "I miss my father. We had our differences, but he taught me everything about working cattle and treating the land right. As for the big house and the fancy things, I thought I'd miss them more than I do. Turns out a man does not need much when he is working sunup to sundown. Though I will admit, having someone to share meals with and talk to in the evenings, that is something I've missed considerable." His honesty caught Lillian off guard. In Boston, conversations were full of carefully constructed pleasantries and hidden meanings. Nathan's direct way of speaking was strange and somewhat refreshing, even if she was still angry with him. The cabin came into view as they rounded a stand of juniper trees. It was small, built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney and a porch that looked recently repaired. The surrounding land stretched out in golden-brown waves dotted with sage and punctuated by dramatic rock formations in the distance. A small barn stood about 50 yards from the cabin, and Lillian could see perhaps 24 cattle grazing in a fenced area beyond that. "It is not much," Nathan said quietly, and the vulnerability in his voice made Lillian's chest tighten despite her determination to remain detached. "But it is honest. Everything you see here, I built with my own hands after the bank took the rest. The cabin's got 2 rooms, the bedroom and the main room with the kitchen. I have been sleeping in the barn to give you proper privacy. There is a root cellar that stays cool even in summer, and the well has good water." Lillian climbed down from the wagon before Nathan could assist her, needing a moment to process what she was seeing. It was not the life she had envisioned, but it was also not as dire as she had feared when she first saw him at the stage stop. The cabin, while small, appeared sturdy and well-maintained. The land had a stark beauty that was completely foreign to her but undeniably striking. And Nathan clearly worked hard. That much was evident in everything from his calloused hands to the careful repairs visible around the property. "Let me show you inside," Nathan offered, carrying her trunk as though it weighed nothing. The interior of the cabin was surprisingly clean. The main room held a stone fireplace, a simple table with 2 chairs, a counter area for food preparation, and shelves lined with canned goods and supplies. Everything was organized with military precision. The bedroom beyond was small but had a real bed frame, a dresser, and a washstand. Someone, presumably Nathan, had placed wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. "I know it is not what you expected," Nathan said, setting her trunk at the foot of the bed. "But I want you to know that if you decide to stay, I will work every day to make things better. I have plans to expand the herd to add rooms to the cabin. It will take time, but I'm good at what I do. The ranch will grow." Lillian removed her hat and set it on the dresser, her fingers brushing the wildflowers. They were a simple gesture, but they showed thought and care. "Why did you need a mail-order bride, Mr. Rivers? Surely there are women here in Nevada who would have been interested in marrying a rancher, even one with modest means." Nathan leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. "Truthfully, most women out here are looking for miners who struck silver or established ranchers with big spreads. I am neither. And the few women I met in town, we did not have anything to talk about beyond pleasantries. Your letters, they showed me someone who thought about things, who had dreams and ideas. You wrote about wanting to learn new things, about feeling trapped in a life that did not fit you. I understood that. I felt the same way when I was trying to be the son my father wanted instead of figuring out who I actually was." "And who are you actually?" Lillian asked, surprising herself with the question. "I'm a man who loves this land even though it is hard and unforgiving. I am someone who would rather have a few good cattle than 100 poor ones. I believe in doing things right even when shortcuts are available. And I am someone who made a terrible mistake by not being honest with you from the start, but who hopes you might see past that to who I really am." Lillian sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted from travel and emotion. "I need time to think, Mr. Rivers. I appreciate your honesty now, even if it came later than it should have, but I cannot make any decisions today. Of course. I will be outside tending to the animals if you need anything. There is fresh bread in the tin on the counter and butter in the cold box in the root cellar. Make yourself at home." He paused at the door. "And Miss Nash, I truly am sorry. For what it is worth, I think you are even more remarkable in person than you were in your letters." After he left, Lillian lay back on the bed and stared at the wooden ceiling. What had she gotten herself into? This was so far from anything she had known in Boston. No servants, no social calls, no libraries or theaters or shops. Just endless land, hard work, and a man who had lied to her but whose eyes held a sincerity that was hard to dismiss. She must have dozed off because when she opened her eyes, the light slanting through the window had shifted. Her body ached from the long journey, but she forced herself to get up and explore her new temporary surroundings. She found the bread Nathan had mentioned and discovered it was freshly baked and quite good. In the root cellar, which was accessed through a trapdoor in the kitchen floor, she found not just butter but eggs, dried meat, and various preserved vegetables. He might not be wealthy, but he was clearly resourceful. Through the window, she could see Nathan working with one of the horses in a corral next to the barn. He moved with easy confidence, his movements economical and sure. As she watched, A calf broke away from the small herd and started heading toward the open range. Nathan whistled sharply, and a brown and white dog she had not noticed before took off after the calf, expertly herding it back to the group. Lillian realized she had not eaten a proper meal since early that morning, and the sun was already lowering toward the horizon. She was still angry, still felt deceived, but she was also practical. If she was going to spend a week here making her decision, she might as well make herself useful. In Boston, she had not been allowed in the kitchen much. That was servant's work, but she had convinced the cook to teach her some basic skills in secret. She had always felt it was absurd that she was expected to run a household without knowing how anything actually functioned. She found flour, lard, and salt, and set about making biscuits. There was dried beef that she sliced thin and set to soak in water to soften. Root vegetables from the cellar could be diced and pan-fried. It was simple food, nothing like the elaborate meals she had known in Boston, but it would be hot and filling. Nathan came in just as she was pulling the biscuits from the oven using a folded towel as a pot holder. He stopped in the doorway, surprise written clearly across his face. "You did not have to do that," he said. "You have been traveling for weeks. I was going to make something simple. I was hungry, and cooking for two is no harder than cooking for one." Lillian set the pan on the counter to cool. "Besides, I have no intention of being useless for a week. If I am staying here, even temporarily, I should contribute." Something shifted in Nathan's expression, a warmth that made Lillian's stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. "Thank you. It smells wonderful. Just let me wash up." He poured water from a large pitcher into a basin and scrubbed his hands and face, then changed his shirt to a cleaner one he pulled from a trunk in the corner. Lillian found herself noticing the play of muscles across his back as he changed, and quickly looked away, feeling her cheeks heat. They sat across from each other at the small table, and for a few minutes, the only sound was eating. The food was simple but satisfying, and Lillian felt proud that she had managed to make it edible despite the unfamiliar kitchen setup. "This is really good," Nathan said. "Where did you learn to cook? I thought, that is, your letters mentioned your aunt and uncle's house being quite grand." "It was. They had a full staff, but I convinced the cook to teach me in secret. My aunt would have been horrified if she knew I was spending time in the kitchen." Lillian took a sip of water. She had very specific ideas about what was appropriate for someone of my station. Most of those ideas involved sitting still, looking decorative, and not having opinions. "That sounds terrible." "It was suffocating," Lillian admitted. The words came easier than she expected. "After my parents died, I was grateful to have somewhere to go. My uncle was my mother's brother, and he and my aunt took me in without question. But as I grew older, I realized they saw me as another piece of their social standing. Something to be displayed and eventually married off to whoever would bring the most advantage to the family." Nathan nodded slowly. "Is that why you answered my advertisement? To escape, partially. But it was also because your letters made me think there might be more to life than what I had known. You wrote about the stars being so bright you felt like you could touch them, about watching thunderstorms roll across the desert, about the satisfaction of working hard and seeing results. It sounded real in a way my life never was." "It is real," Nathan said quietly. "Sometimes too real when a dry spell hits or a cow gets sick or the coyotes start stalking the herd. But even on the hard days, I would rather be here than anywhere else." They talked late into the evening, the conversation flowing more easily than Lillian would have thought possible given the circumstances. Nathan told her about growing up on the larger ranch, about learning to rope and ride before he could properly raid, about his mother, who had died when he was 12. and how his father had become harder after that, focused entirely on building the ranch into something impressive. Lillian shared memories of her parents, who had died in a fire when she was 14. Her father had been a professor, and her mother had scandalized her family by marrying for love rather than status. They had been happy despite not being wealthy, and Lillian's childhood had been filled with books and ideas and laughter. Living with her aunt and uncle after that had been like moving to a different country. When Nathan finally stood to leave for the barn, Lillian found herself reluctant to see him go. "Mr. Rivers, would it be terribly improper to ask what your plans are for tomorrow? I would like to understand what daily life here actually entails. I think given that we are supposed to be engaged, you could call me Nathan, and I would be honored to have you call me that." He smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Lillian's heart skip. "Tomorrow I need to ride out and check on the water situation at the far end of the property. One of the springs was running low last time I looked. You are welcome to come along if you want. You know how to ride?" "I have had a few lessons, but nothing extensive. My aunt thought horseback riding was unladylike. I have a gentle mare that would be perfect for a rider still learning. If you want to come, I will teach you properly. Fair warning, though, it will be several hours in the saddle, and you will be sore afterward if you are not used to it." "I would like to come," Lillian said, and realized she meant it. "Thank you." After Nathan left, Lillian prepared for bed, washing with water from the pitcher and changing into her nightgown. The cabin was quiet except for the wind outside and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. She lay in bed, watching moonlight pattern the floor through the window, and realized that for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt something other than anxious or angry. She felt curious, interested, maybe even a little bit hopeful. The next morning arrived with brilliant sunshine streaming through the window. Lillian woke to the smell of coffee and found that Nathan had left a pot on the stove, still warm, along with a note saying he was feeding the animals and to take her time. She poured herself a cup and was pleasantly surprised by how good it tasted, strong and rich without being bitter. She dressed in her most practical outfit, a skirt of sturdy brown wool and a white blouse, then braided her hair and pinned it up securely. When she emerged from the cabin, Nathan was leading 2 horses from the barn, one a tall gelding and the other a smaller dappled mare with kind eyes. "This is Rosie," Nathan said, stroking the mare's neck. "She is the sweetest horse I have ever known. My mother used to ride her." Lillian approached slowly, holding out her hand as Nathan had shown her in the stories he wrote about horses. Rosie snuffled at her palm, then allowed Lillian to pet her soft nose. "Hello, Rosie. I promise I will try not to be too terrible at this." "You will be fine," Nathan assured her. "Let me show you how to mount properly." He was a patient teacher, explaining how to position herself, how to hold the reins, how to communicate with the horse through gentle pressure and weight shifts. When Lillian settled into the saddle, feeling precarious and excited, Nathan adjusted the stirrups and made sure she was comfortable before mounting his own horse with fluid grace. They started at a walk, staying close to the cabin while Lillian got used to the sensation. It was both frightening and exhilarating to be so high up, feeling the living creature beneath her responding to her smallest movements. Nathan rode beside her, offering encouragement and gentle corrections to her posture. "You are doing great," he said after they had circled the property once. "You have good instincts. Ready to venture a bit farther?" "Yes," Lillian said, and was rewarded with another of those smiles that made her insides flutter. They rode out across the property at an easy pace, and Lillian was amazed by how different the land looked from horseback compared to the wagon. The scale of everything changed. She could see for miles in every direction. the landscape rolling away in waves of gold and sage green, punctuated by dramatic rock formations that glowed pink and orange in the morning light. Nathan pointed out different plants and explained which ones were good for the cattle and which to avoid. He showed her how to read the land for water signs and told stories about different areas of the property. His knowledge was deep and clearly earned through years of experience, and Lillian found herself fascinated by the complexity of what she had assumed was simple ranching. When they reached the spring he had mentioned, Lillian could see immediately why he was concerned. The water flow was minimal, barely more than a trickle. Nathan dismounted and crouched beside it, examining the ground. "Something is blocking it upstream," he said, frowning. "I am going to need to trace it back and clear whatever is causing the problem. That might take a few hours. You can head back to the cabin if you want, or you can wait here where there is shade." He gestured to a cluster of rocks and a twisted juniper tree. "I can help," Lillian offered. "What would I need to do?" Nathan looked surprised, then pleased. "It will likely involve some climbing and definitely getting dirty. Your dress might not survive. I have other dresses. Show me what to do." They spent the next 3 hours working their way upstream from the spring, following the underground watercourse where Nathan knew it ran. Eventually, they found the problem. A small landslide had diverted the water into a different channel. Working together, they moved rocks and dug new channels to redirect the flow back to its original path. Lillian's hands were scraped and her dress was filthy. But when they finally got the water flowing properly again, she felt a surge of pride unlike anything she had experienced in Boston. They had identified a problem and solved it through physical labor and practical thinking. She had contributed something real and useful. "We make a good team," Nathan said, wiping sweat from his forehead and leaving a streak of dirt behind. "Thank you for your help. This would have taken me twice as long alone." "I enjoyed it," Lillian admitted. "It felt good to do something tangible." They ate lunch sitting on the rocks near the now flowing spring, sharing bread and cheese Nathan had packed in his saddlebags. The high desert sun was hot but not unbearable, and a slight breeze made the temperature pleasant. Lizards darted among the rocks, and a hawk circled high overhead. "Tell me something," Lillian said, watching the hawk. "If I had not come, if I had refused to get off the stage at all, what would you have done?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "I honestly do not know. Probably kept working, kept building the ranch back up. Maybe eventually tried to find someone local willing to marry a poor rancher with more ambition than assets. But I think I would have spent the rest of my life regretting that I did not at least meet you. Your letters got me through some dark times after I lost the main ranch. Knowing there was someone out there who understood about feeling trapped, who wanted something different from life, it gave me hope. My letters meant that much to you. They did. They do." He turned to look at her directly, his brown eyes intense. "I know I lied about my circumstances, and I know that is hard to forgive, but everything else in those letters was true. My feelings, my thoughts, the person I showed you, that was all real. The only lie was about having money." Lillian felt something shift inside her chest. "I appreciate you saying that. I need time to think about what it means for my decision, but I appreciate your honesty now." They rode back to the cabin in comfortable silence, and Lillian realized her body was indeed sore from hours in the saddle, but it was a good kind of soreness that came from productive work. When they reached the barn, Nathan helped her dismount, his hand steadying her waist as she slid down from Rosie's back. For a moment they stood very close, and Lillian was acutely aware of his height, his strength, the way he smelled of honest sweat and sage. "I should clean up and start dinner," she said, stepping back, her voice slightly breathless. "I will take care of the horses and be in shortly." Nathan replied, his voice also a bit rough. That evening they fell into an easy routine of working together to prepare the meal. Nathan showed Lillian where he kept different supplies and shared tips for cooking on the wood stove. They made a simple stew with beef and vegetables, and Lillian found herself laughing at Nathan's story about his first attempt at cooking after losing the main ranch, when he had burned everything so badly even the dog would not eat it. "The dog's name is Chance, by the way," Nathan said. "He is probably off somewhere hunting rabbits right now, but he will show up for dinner. He has a sixth sense for when food is ready." Sure enough, as they were sitting down to eat, a brown and white cattle dog trotted up to the cabin and pushed his way inside. He went directly to Nathan for a head pat, then noticed Lillian and approached cautiously. "Hello, Chance," Lillian said softly, holding out her hand for him to sniff. After a moment's consideration, the dog licked her fingers and wagged his tail. "Oh, you are a good boy, are you not?" "He likes you," Nathan observed, looking pleased. "He is usually suspicious of strangers." Over dinner, Nathan asked Lillian about her life in Boston, really asked, wanting to know details about her daily routines and what she had enjoyed. She told him about sneaking into her uncle's library to read books he would have considered inappropriate for women, about the one friend she had who shared her longing for something more than society expected, about the theater performances she had loved despite her aunt's insistence they were frivolous. "What kinds of books did you read?" Nathan asked, genuinely interested. "Everything I could get my hands on. Philosophy, science, exploration narratives. I particularly loved reading about naturalists who traveled to study plants and animals. My favorite was a woman who disguised herself as a man so she could join an expedition to South America." Nathan laughed. "I bet you would have liked that life, exploring unknown territories. Perhaps. Though I am beginning to think that Nevada is quite exotic enough for someone who has never been out of Boston before yesterday." "It does have its charms," Nathan agreed. "Speaking of which, there is something I would like to show you after dinner if you are not too tired. But it requires waiting until dark." Intrigued, Lillian agreed. After they cleaned up the dinner dishes together, Nathan brought out a worn deck of cards and taught her several games to pass the time until the sun set completely. He was funny and relaxed, and Lillian found herself laughing more in those few hours than she had in months back in Boston. When full darkness fell, Nathan led her outside with a blanket. He spread it on the ground in front of the cabin and gestured for her to lie down. She did, feeling slightly foolish and very improper to be lying on a blanket with a man she barely knew, but when she looked up, all thoughts of propriety vanished from her mind. The sky was an explosion of stars, more stars than Lillian had ever imagined existed. They spread across the darkness in swaths of light, some bright and sharp, others soft and distant. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of luminescence. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh my goodness." "There is no light pollution out here," Nathan explained, lying down beside her, carefully maintaining a respectful distance. "The sky is clear most nights and this is what you see. I never get tired of it." They lay there for a long time, Nathan pointing out constellations and telling her the stories behind them. Some he knew from books, others were stories his mother had taught him, mixing traditional astronomy with her own imagination. Lillian felt a sense of wonder and smallness that was not frightening but somehow comforting. The universe was vast and beautiful and she was part of it. "Thank you for showing me this," she said quietly. "You were right in your letters. I feel like I could reach up and touch them." "Lillian," Nathan said, his voice serious, "I know you need time to make your decision and I respect that. But I want you to know that days like today, working together, talking, sharing this, This is what I imagined when I wrote those letters. Not the fancy house or the money, but having someone to share this life with. Someone who sees the beauty in the simple things and is not afraid to work hard. Lillian turned her head to look at him, his profile outlined by starlight. I see that now. I wish you had been honest from the beginning, but I understand why you were afraid. I was afraid too in Boston, afraid I would be stuck forever in a life that was not mine. Are you still afraid? Yes, she admitted. But of different things now. I'm afraid of making the wrong choice. I am afraid that what I am feeling might just be the novelty of everything being new and different. I am afraid of trusting someone who lied to me, even if I understand why. Those are reasonable fears, Nathan said. I'm afraid too, afraid you will realize you are too good for this life and leave. Afraid I will never be able to give you the comfort you deserve. Afraid that I already care too much after only 2 days. His last words hung in the air between them. Lillian's heart pounded as she processed what he had just confessed. Nathan, she started, then stopped, not sure what to say. You do not have to respond to that, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know. I promise to be honest with you from now on, and that is part of being honest. They eventually went back inside, and Lillian lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened over the past 2 days. Nothing was what she had expected. The ranch was smaller, the life harder, the amenities minimal. But Nathan was more than she had expected. More genuine, more thoughtful, more appealing. And the land, despite its harshness, had a beauty that called to something deep inside her. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Lillian woke early and helped Nathan with morning chores, feeding chickens she had not even noticed the first day, collecting eggs, and learning to milk the 2 cows he kept near the barn. Nathan was endlessly patient as a teacher, never making her feel foolish for not knowing things that were second nature to him. In return, Lillian took over most of the cooking and began organizing the cabin more efficiently. She washed their clothes in a large basin, a task that left her arms aching but gave her satisfaction to see everything clean and hanging on the line to dry. She mended tears in Nathan's work shirts and even altered one of her less fancy dresses to be more practical for ranch work. Each evening, they would sit outside and watch the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about his plans for expanding the herd, about possibly adding sheep because they were more drought-resistant. Lillian shared her idea about starting a small garden near the cabin where they could grow vegetables, and Nathan immediately helped her plan where it should go and how they would protect it from rabbits and other wildlife. On the 4th day, a neighboring rancher rode up while they were working on repairing a section of fence. The man was older, perhaps in his 60s, with a weathered face and sharp blue eyes. He introduced himself as Robert Murphy and owned the spread to the east. "Heard you had a woman staying with you, Rivers," Murphy said, though his tone was friendly rather than accusatory. "This the mail-order bride I heard about in town." "This is Miss Lillian Nash," Nathan said, his voice carrying a protective edge. "She is here considering whether or not she wants to stay and marry me. We are taking time to get to know each other properly." Murphy looked at Lillian with open curiosity. "Smart girl, making sure of what you are getting into. This life is not easy for women used to cities and comforts." "Are you finding it as terrible as you expected?" Lillian straightened her back and met his eyes directly. "I am finding it different from what I expected, Mr. Murphy, but not terrible. In fact, I am discovering there is satisfaction in useful work and in seeing the direct results of your efforts." Murphy's face split into a grin. "Well now, got some backbone to you, do you not? Good, you will need it out here." He turned back to Nathan. "The reason I came by, besides nosiness, is to let you know there is a community gathering in town this Saturday. Dancing, potluck, the usual. You too should come. Let people meet your lady properly, assuming she is still here come Saturday. After Murphy left, Nathan looked at Lillian uncertainly. You do not have to go if you do not want to. Those gatherings can be overwhelming if you are not used to them. Lots of questions and people getting in your business. I think I would like to go, Lillian said. If I am going to make a decision about staying here, I should understand the whole community, not just this ranch. Saturday arrived with Lillian feeling nervous and excited. She wore one of her nicer dresses, a deep blue that brought out her eyes, and carefully arranged her hair. Nathan had clearly made an effort too, wearing clean trousers and a shirt that did not have any patches, his hair damp and neatly combed. The ride into town was pleasant, and when they arrived at the building that served as both church and community hall, there were already several dozen people gathered. Lillian felt many eyes on her as Nathan helped her down from the wagon, but most faces seemed curious rather than hostile. An older woman bustled over immediately. You must be Miss Nash. I am Dorothy Patterson, and I run the general store in town. We have been absolutely dying to meet you properly. Come, let me introduce you around. Nathan squeezed Lillian's hand briefly before she was swept away by Mrs. Patterson. Over the next hour, Lillian met what seemed like everyone in Empire City and the surrounding ranches. There were miners from the nearby silver operations, ranching families, the town's single doctor, the blacksmith, the saloon owner who was surprisingly refined, and various other characters who made up the fabric of frontier life. The women were particularly interested in her, asking about Boston, her journey west, and what she thought of Nevada. Lillian found herself being honest, talking about the stark beauty of the land, the challenges of adapting, and the surprising satisfaction of ranch work. She noticed several women exchanging approving glances. Nathan Rivers is a good man, one woman, introduced as Sarah Thompson, told her quietly. Lost everything when the bank foreclosed, but he never complained, just got to work building something new. There are not many men who would have handled it as gracefully. The dancing started as evening approached, a local man with a fiddle joined by another with a guitar. Nathan appeared at Lillian's elbow and extended his hand. May I have this dance, Miss Nash? Lillian had learned formal ballroom dancing in Boston, but this was something entirely different. The dances were faster, more energetic, with couples swinging and twirling. Nathan was surprisingly graceful for such a tall man, leading her through the steps with confidence and laughing when she stumbled. You are doing great, he said as they paused between songs, both slightly breathless. See, you are adapting better than you thought. I am adapting to some things, Lillian allowed, very aware of his hand still holding hers. The jury is still out on others. They danced several more times, and Lillian found herself genuinely enjoying the evening. The people were friendly and welcoming, the music was lively, and the sense of community was strong. It was different from Boston society, less formal and more practical, but there was warmth here that she had not expected. On the ride home, comfortable silence stretched between them until Nathan finally spoke. Tomorrow is your 7th day, the week you asked for. Lillian's stomach dropped. In the rhythm of daily life and new experiences, she had almost forgotten the deadline she had set. Yes, I suppose it is. Have you made your decision? I need one more night to think, Lillian said honestly. Is that all right? Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer to pay your fare back to Boston stands no matter what you decide. That night, Lillian lay in bed unable to sleep, her mind spinning through everything that had happened. She thought about the life she had left behind in Boston, the comfort, the familiarity, the culture and civilization. Then she thought about the life Nathan offered. Hard work, uncertainty, isolation, but also freedom, purpose, and a man who was honest and kind and made her heart race. She thought about the stars, about fixing the spring, about learning to ride Rosie, about the quiet satisfaction of baking bread and seeing Nathan's face light up when he tasted it. She thought about how natural it felt to work beside him, how easy their conversations flowed, how right it seemed when he held her hand during the dancing. But was a week enough time to make such a monumental decision? Could she really trust what she was feeling? As dawn broke, Lillian finally admitted to herself what her heart had known for days. She wanted to stay. Not because of what she had left behind in Boston, but because of what she had found here. Nathan was not perfect, and neither was the life he offered, but both were real and honest in a way that resonated with something deep inside her. She found Nathan in the barn, already at work despite the early hour. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the anxiety in his eyes. "I have made my decision," Lillian said, and watched him brace himself for what he clearly expected to be rejection. "I want to stay. I want to marry you and build this life together." The expression that crossed Nathan's face was pure joy mixed with disbelief. "Truly, you mean it?" "I mean it," Lillian confirmed, and then found herself swept up in his arms, lifted off her feet as he spun her around. "Thank you," he said, setting her down but keeping his hands on her waist. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I promise I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your choice." "I have one condition, though," Lillian said, and Nathan's face grew serious. "Anything. From now on, we are honest with each other about everything. No more half-truths or omissions, even if you think the truth might hurt. I need to know I can trust you completely." "You have my word," Nathan said solemnly. "Complete honesty, always." Then he did something that made Lillian's breath catch. He cupped her face gently in his calloused hands and looked into her eyes with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "May I kiss you?" In answer, Lillian rose up on her toes and closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them exploring this new aspect of their relationship. Then Nathan deepened it, pulling her closer, and Lillian felt heat bloom through her entire body. This was nothing like the chaste pecks she had received from the few suitors her aunt had approved. This was passion tempered with care, desire mixed with respect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably wait to do more of that until after we are properly married." Lillian laughed, feeling giddy and alive. "Probably wise, though I make no promises about being very patient." They decided to have a simple wedding in town the following week, giving them time to arrange things properly, but not so long that they had to maintain propriety for months. Nathan rode into town to speak with the circuit preacher who came through monthly. And as luck would have it, he was due to arrive in just 5 days. Lillian used the time to alter her best dress for the wedding and to bake bread and pastries for the small reception they planned. Nathan worked on adding finishing touches to the cabin, including building a proper bench for the porch and repairing a window that had been letting in drafts. Mrs. Patterson from the general store proved to be an invaluable ally, helping Lillian acquire the few things she needed and spreading word about the wedding so that people could come if they wanted. Despite knowing Nathan and Lillian for such a short time, the older woman seemed genuinely invested in their happiness. "I can see the way he looks at you," Mrs. Patterson said as she helped Lillian pick out fabric for new curtains. "That boy is head over heels. And you, whether you fully realize it yet or not, you look at him the same way." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and moderate temperatures. The ceremony was held in the community building, with perhaps 40 people in attendance. Lillian wore her altered dress, and Nathan wore new clothes purchased with money he admitted he had been saving for ranch improvements, but insisted spending on looking proper for their wedding. As Lillian walked down the aisle, she felt none of the doubt or fear she had experienced arriving in Empire City 2 weeks earlier. Nathan stood at the front looking nervous and handsome and completely smitten, and Lillian knew she was making the right choice. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows promising to love and support each other through whatever challenges came, and when the preacher pronounced them married, Nathan's kiss was both respectful and full of promise for later. The reception was lively, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible from such a small community. People pressed small gifts on them: preserves, tools, a beautiful quilt made by several of the ranch wives working together, seeds for Lillian's planned garden. Robert Murphy, the neighboring rancher, pulled Nathan aside at one point. Lillian watched from across the room, seeing Murphy talk seriously while Nathan listened and nodded. When Nathan returned to her side, he looked thoughtful. "Everything all right?" Lillian asked. "Yes." "Murphy was offering to sell me some breeding stock on credit, says I can pay him back when the calves are grown and sold. It is a generous offer that will help us expand faster than I could alone." "That is wonderful," Lillian said, squeezing his hand. "You have good friends here." "We have good friends here," Nathan corrected. "They are your community now, too." As the sun set, they said their goodbyes and headed back to the ranch. The cabin felt different when they arrived, no longer a temporary situation but their home. Nathan lit lamps while Lillian changed out of her wedding dress into a nightgown she had made from soft cotton, her hands shaking slightly with nerves and anticipation. When she emerged from the bedroom, Nathan was standing by the window looking out at the night. He had removed his new jacket and unbuttoned the top of his shirt. He turned when he heard her, and the look in his eyes made Lillian's skin flush with heat. "Come here," he said softly, and she did, walking across the room until she stood before him. Nathan reached out and gently unpinned her hair, letting it fall in waves around her shoulders. "You are so beautiful," he murmured. "I still cannot believe you chose to stay." "I chose you," Lillian corrected. "The life, the ranch, all of that comes with you, but it is you I want, Nathan." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, his hands sliding into her hair and down her back. Lillian pressed against him, her own hands exploring the muscles of his chest and shoulders. When Nathan lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, she went willingly, eager to discover this final aspect of their new life together. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, Nathan taking time to learn what pleased her, to make sure she was comfortable and ready. There was some pain, as Lillian had been warned there might be for the first time, but Nathan was gentle and patient, and the pain quickly gave way to pleasure she had never imagined. Afterward they lay tangled together, Lillian's head on Nathan's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "I am more than all right," Lillian assured him. "I am happy." Over the following months, Lillian settled fully into her new life. She learned to ride Rosie with confidence, often accompanying Nathan on his daily work around the ranch. She started her garden, which flourished with careful tending. She became proficient at all manner of tasks she never would have learned in Boston: making cheese, preserving meat, treating minor illnesses in the cattle, even helping Nathan deliver a difficult calf one cold night. The seasons changed, and Lillian discovered she loved the dramatic beauty of Nevada through all of them. Summer was hot, but not unbearable at their elevation. Fall brought golden light that made the landscape glow. Winter was surprisingly cold with occasional snow that transformed the desert into something magical. Spring arrived with explosions of wildflowers that turned the brown hills purple and gold. The ranch grew too. The breeding stock from Murphy produced healthy calves, which they raised carefully. Nathan's reputation for quality cattle spread, and he began getting better prices at market. It was slow progress, but it was progress nonetheless. They added a room to the cabin, planning for the future. Lillian learned to keep the books and proved to have a good head for finances. Their relationship deepened as well. The initial passion of newlyweds mellowed into something richer and more stable, though they never lost the spark between them. They worked as a team, each respecting the other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. When they disagreed, which happened occasionally, they talked through it until they found solutions. Lillian maintained a correspondence with her friend from Boston, the one who had shared her desire for something more. She wrote honestly about her life, the challenges and the joys, and encouraged her friend to be brave in pursuing her own happiness. She sent one letter to her aunt and uncle, informing them of her marriage and expressing hope that they were well, but she received no reply and did not expect one. About a year after their wedding, Lillian realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure before telling Nathan, wanting to have the doctor in town confirm it first. When Dr. Hayes, a gruff but kind man in his 50s, confirmed she was indeed expecting a child, Lillian felt a mix of excitement and terror. She told Nathan that evening after dinner. He had been showing her his plans for a new barn, sketches drawn carefully on brown paper, but he set them aside immediately when he saw her serious expression. "Is something wrong?" he asked, concern clear in his voice. "No, nothing is wrong, at least I do not think so." Lillian took a deep breath. "Nathan, I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." The look on his face was one she would remember for the rest of her life, shock giving way to wonder, giving way to pure joy. He whooped loudly enough to startle Chance from his sleeping spot by the fire, then pulled Lillian into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "Truly, a baby." His voice was choked with emotion. "Truly. The doctor says I am probably about 2 months along, so the baby will come sometime in early spring." Nathan kissed her thoroughly, then knelt down and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father and I am going to love you so much." Tears spilled down Lillian's cheeks. "You are going to be such a good father." The pregnancy progressed normally, though Lillian found the first few months challenging with frequent nausea. Nathan was endlessly patient and helpful, taking over tasks that made her feel ill and bringing her weak tea and dry toast in the mornings. As her belly grew, the women from surrounding ranches visited frequently, bringing advice and baby clothes and reassurance. Mrs. Patterson took a particular interest, treating Lillian like the daughter she had never had. She helped Lillian prepare the new room as a nursery, sewing tiny gowns and blankets. Sarah Thompson, who had several children of her own, answered Lillian's many questions about what to expect during birth and afterward. When Lillian's time came on a chilly morning in March, Nathan rode frantically into town to fetch Dr. Hayes while Mrs. Patterson, who had been staying with them for the past week in anticipation, helped Lillian through the early stages of labor. The birth was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the evening. Nathan paced outside, refusing to leave despite Mrs. Patterson telling him to go tend to the animals. Finally, as the sun was setting, the thin cry of a newborn filled the cabin. Dr. Hayes came out to where Nathan stood frozen on the porch. "You have a son," the doctor announced with a tired smile, "and your wife is exhausted but fine. You can come in now." Nathan entered the cabin on shaking legs. Lillian lay in their bed, hair damp with sweat but smiling radiantly. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and when she pulled back the blanket, Nathan saw the most perfect thing he had ever witnessed. His son, red-faced and squalling, tiny fists waving. "Would you like to hold him?" Lillian asked. Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the bed and accepted the bundle with extreme care. The baby seemed impossibly small and fragile. He had a dusting of dark hair, and when he opened his eyes briefly, they appeared to be blue like his mother's. "What should we name him?" Nathan asked, unable to look away from his son's face. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at the tiny life they had created together, Lillian knew exactly what felt right. "I was thinking Thomas after my father, Thomas Rivers." "Thomas," Nathan repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful. Thomas was a healthy baby with strong lungs and definite opinions about when he wanted to be fed or held. Nathan was a devoted father, waking with Lillian for night feedings and spending every free moment with his son. Lillian marveled at how natural fatherhood seemed for him. As Thomas grew, the ranch continued to thrive. Nathan hired a young man from town to help with the heavier work, giving Nathan more time with his family. By Thomas's first birthday, the herd had grown large enough that they were able to make significant improvements. A new barn, a larger house with proper rooms for their growing family, better fencing. Lillian sometimes thought about the life she might have had if she had gotten back on that stagecoach nearly 3 years earlier. She would probably be married to her aunt and uncle's choice by now, living comfortably but miserably in Boston. Instead, she was here in the Nevada desert with calloused hands and sun-darkened skin, with a husband she loved more than she had thought possible, and a son who was the light of both their lives. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked her one evening as they sat on the porch watching Thomas toddle after chance in the yard. "Giving up the easy life for this?" "Never," Lillian answered without hesitation. "This life is not easy, but it is real. And you, Nathan Rivers, are the best decision I ever made." He pulled her close and kissed her temple. "The feeling is mutual, Lillian Rivers. You took a chance on a poor cowboy with more hope than assets, and you made him the richest man in Nevada." "Careful with the compliments," Lillian teased. "I might expect you to make them regularly." "I plan to," Nathan promised. "Every single day for the rest of our lives." 2 years later, they welcomed their second child, a daughter they named Margaret after Nathan's mother. She had Lillian's blonde hair and Nathan's brown eyes and a temperament that was both sweet and stubborn. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from feeding to diaper changes. The ranch had grown into something Nathan's father would have been proud of. They now had one of the better spreads in the area, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. Nathan had paid back Murphy with interest and maintained good relationships with all their neighbors. Lillian had become an integral part of the community, helping organize gatherings and assisting other families when needed. When Thomas was 5 and Margaret was 3, Lillian discovered she was expecting again. This pregnancy was easier than the first 2, perhaps because she now knew what to expect. Nathan was equally excited, though he confided to Lillian that he hoped this time they might have another girl. "I love Thomas more than life itself," he explained. "But there is something special about Margaret. The way she looks at me like I hung the moon, I want that again." Lillian laughed. "Thomas looks at you the same way when you are teaching him to rope or letting him help with the horses." "That is different," Nathan insisted. "That is my boy learning to be a man. Margaret, she makes me want to be better just because she exists." Their third child arrived in late fall, and to Nathan's delight, It was indeed another daughter. They named her Sarah, after Sarah Thompson, who had been such a help to Lillian when Thomas was born and who remained a close friend. Sarah was an easy baby, content to sleep and eat and watch her older siblings with curious eyes. Life settled into a rhythm that Lillian found deeply satisfying. The days were full of work and laughter, of teaching the children and growing the ranch, of stolen moments with Nathan when the children were asleep. She taught Thomas and Margaret to read, using the books she had brought from Boston and new ones they ordered from catalogs. Nathan taught Thomas about ranching and let Margaret tag along to learn as well, dismissing the idea that ranch work was only for boys. When the children were older, Lillian sometimes told them the story of how she and their father met. About the long journey from Boston, the shock of discovering the truth, and the week that changed everything. The children loved this story, particularly the part about their mother climbing up rocks to fix the spring. "Were you really mad at Papa?" Thomas asked once, his young face serious. "I was," Lillian confirmed. "But your father showed me that being honest about who you are is more important than pretending to be something you are not. And he showed me that love is not about fancy things or comfort. It is about working together, supporting each other, and choosing each other every single day." "You," Margaret said, wrinkling her nose, though at 7 she was beginning to be interested in such things. "You really like kissing and stuff." Nathan, who had been listening from the doorway, entered and pulled Lillian close. "Your mother and I really like kissing and stuff," he confirmed with a grin. "And when you are much, much older, you will understand why." The children groaned dramatically, but Lillian could see they loved knowing their parents were happy together. There was security in that for them. As the years passed, the ranch continued to prosper. They built a proper ranch house, spacious and comfortable without being ostentatious. They hired more hands to help with the work as the herd grew larger. Nathan became a respected voice in local ranching associations, known for his integrity and innovative approaches to dealing with Nevada's challenging climate. Lillian found her own niche in the community, becoming a teacher of sorts for the area children. Several families banded together to build a small schoolhouse in Empire City, and Lillian taught there 3 days a week during the school months. The other ranch women took turns teaching on the remaining days, each bringing their own expertise to the children's education. When Thomas turned 16, Nathan gave him his own section of the ranch to manage, teaching him responsibility and business skills. Thomas took to it naturally, showing the same love for the land that his father had. Margaret, now 14, was equally involved in the ranch operations and announced her intention to never marry if it meant giving up working with cattle. Nathan assured her she could do both if she found the right partner. "Like you and Mama," Margaret said. "You work together." "Exactly like your mother and me," Nathan agreed. Sarah, the youngest at 12, was the most scholarly of the children. She loved reading even more than Lillian did, and talked about perhaps becoming a teacher or even a doctor. Nathan and Lillian encouraged all their children's dreams, whatever they might be. One evening, after the children were asleep and Nathan and Lillian sat on the porch of their now comfortable home, Lillian reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Nearly 20 years had passed since that dusty afternoon when she stepped off the stagecoach expecting luxury and found something far more valuable. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, taking her hand in his. "Everything. How scared I was that first day, how angry. How close I came to leaving." "Thank God you did not," Nathan said, bringing her hand to his lips. "I cannot imagine my life without you." "I was thinking the same thing," Lillian said. "If I had known then what I know now, I would have agreed to marry you the moment we met." You gave me so much more than luxury, Nathan. You gave me freedom and purpose and love beyond anything I imagined. You saved me too, Nathan said seriously. After losing the main ranch, I was just going through the motions. You gave me a reason to build something real again. A family, a home, a life worth living. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars that had been the first thing they shared all those years ago. The night was cool but not cold, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. "Do you think the children understand how lucky we are?" Lillian asked. "To have found each other. I think they will eventually," Nathan replied. "When they are older and trying to build their own lives, their own families. They will remember us working together, supporting each other, choosing each other every day, and hopefully they will find partners who do the same for them." "I hope so," Lillian agreed. "I want them to know what real love feels like." More years passed, bringing changes and challenges. There were difficult times, droughts that tested their resources, market downturns that required careful financial management, illnesses that scared them. But Nathan and Lillian faced everything together, their bond strengthening with each trial overcome. Thomas eventually married a woman from a neighboring ranch, and they built their own home on the far section of the property Nathan had given him. Margaret took longer to find someone who matched her spirit, but at 23, she married a man who respected her independence and shared her love of ranching. Sarah went east to study teaching, then returned to Empire City to run the now expanded school. Nathan and Lillian became grandparents multiple times over, and they loved this new phase of life. Being able to enjoy the children without the full responsibility of raising them had its own pleasures. They spoiled their grandchildren with affection and stories and long rides across the ranch. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the main house for a celebration. All 3 children were there with their spouses and children. Friends from throughout the area came to honor the couple who had become pillars of the community. As Lillian looked around at the gathering, at the life they had built together, she felt overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to Nathan as they danced together, still moving with the easy partnership they had developed so many years ago. "For what?" he asked, though he was smiling because he probably knew. "For lying to me in those letters," Lillian said, and laughed at his shocked expression. "If you had been completely honest, I might have chosen someone else, someone who offered more security on paper. Instead, I got you, and you gave me a life beyond anything I could have planned for myself." "I am glad my dishonesty worked out," Nathan said dryly, then grew serious. "But truly, Lillian, every good thing in my life came from you saying yes. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "The feeling is entirely mutual," Lillian assured him, and kissed him right there in front of everyone, not caring who saw. Their children groaned good-naturedly, but Lillian caught Thomas saying to his wife, "That is what I want us to be like when we have been married 30 years. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Nathan and Lillian walked out to the porch of the main house, the same porch where they had sat so many times over the years. The stars were as brilliant as ever, the desert air cool and clear. "Do you remember the first time I showed you the stars?" Nathan asked. "I remember everything about those first days," Lillian said. "I remember being furious and confused and secretly fascinated by you. Secretly. I was too angry to admit it at the time," Lillian laughed. "But even then I was drawn to you. The way you were so honest about your feelings, so open about your hopes and fears. It was so different from the men I had known in Boston." "I was terrified you would leave," Nathan admitted. "Every day of that first week, I expected you to announce you were done and wanted to go home." "This became home," Lillian said simply. "Faster than I expected, but completely. You became home. They stood together looking out at the land they had built their life on, at the lights from Thomas's house in the distance, and the barn where their grandchildren's horses were stabled. Everything they could see was the result of hard work, dedication, and love. I would do it all again, Nathan said. Every struggle, every challenge, everything, as long as it led to this. So would I, Lillian agreed, 1,000 times over. The years continued their steady march. Nathan's hair turned silver and Lillian's blonde became white. Their bodies bore the marks of decades of hard work, but they still rose each morning with purpose. The ranch was now primarily run by Thomas with help from Margaret's family, but Nathan still rode out most days, unable to fully retire from the work he loved. Lillian continued teaching part-time until she was well into her 60s, finally stepping back only when Sarah's daughter expressed interest in taking over. She spent her free time reading, writing long letters to friends scattered across the West, and spoiling her great-grandchildren who were beginning to arrive. On a spring morning 45 years after Lillian first arrived in Empire City, she and Nathan sat on their porch watching the sunrise. This had become their routine, waking early, making coffee, and spending the quiet hours of dawn together before the day's activities began. 45 years, Nathan mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday you stepped off that stage, all Boston elegance and righteous fury. I was so angry, Lillian remembered with a smile. So certain I had made a terrible mistake. Best mistake of your life? Nathan asked, the question teasing but with genuine curiosity beneath it. Best decision, Lillian corrected. Once I got past the initial shock, staying was a decision, not a mistake. Choosing you was a decision. Building this life together was thousands of small decisions, one after another, always choosing us. Nathan reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades. I love you, Lillian Rivers, more now than even that first day when you agreed to stay. I did not know it was possible to love someone more over time, but every year, every day, I find more reasons to love you. I love you too, Lillian said, squeezing his hand. You gave me everything I needed, and so much I did not even know to want. Freedom, partnership, adventure, purpose, and love. So much love. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The desert landscape that had seemed so harsh and unwelcoming 45 years ago now felt like an old friend, familiar and beloved. This land had tested them, challenged them, and ultimately accepted them as part of itself. No regrets? Nathan asked, as he had asked so many times over the years. Not a single one, Lillian answered, as she always did. You promised me a good life, Nathan Rivers, and you delivered. It was not the life I expected, but it was so much better. Their children and grandchildren arrived later that morning for Sunday dinner, as had become tradition. The house filled with noise and laughter, and the chaos of multiple generations gathered together. As Lillian looked around at her family, at the legacy she and Nathan had created, she felt a profound sense of peace and satisfaction. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Nathan and Lillian prepared for bed with the ease of long practice. They moved around each other in the small bedroom, now expanded and comfortable but still the same space where they had spent their wedding night so many years ago. Come look at the stars with me, Nathan said, offering his hand. They walked out to the porch wrapped in blankets and stood together looking up at the vast Nevada sky. The stars were as brilliant as ever, perhaps even more so in their old age when they appreciated the beauty of simple things. Thank you, Nathan said quietly. For what? Lillian asked, though she suspected she knew. For staying, for choosing me, for building this beautiful life with me, for 45 years of partnership and love and adventure. The pleasure was entirely mine, Lillian assured him. Though I think we should make it 50 years at least. I'm not done with you yet, Nathan Rivers. He laughed and pulled her close, and they stood together under the stars, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something remarkable together. A poor cowboy with a failing ranch and a Boston lady expecting luxury had somehow created a love story that would be told in their family for generations. As they finally went inside to sleep, Lillian took one last look at the stars. She remembered that first night Nathan had shown them to her, how she had felt small and lost and uncertain. Now, looking at those same stars, she felt grounded and found and sure. This was where she belonged, with Nathan in Nevada, living a life that was real and hard and beautiful. They lived several more years together, watching their family continue to grow and the ranch continue to thrive. When Nathan finally passed at the age of 83, it was peacefully in his sleep after a full day working the land he loved. Lillian mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had lived fully and loved completely. Lillian stayed on the ranch, surrounded by family, for another 5 years. She spent her time with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing down stories and wisdom from a life well lived. She wrote down the story of how she and Nathan met, wanting future generations to know the truth of their beginning. When Lillian passed at 85, she was buried next to Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch. The entire community came to pay respects to the woman who had arrived as a stranger expecting luxury, and stayed to become a beloved mother, grandmother, teacher, and friend. Her children spoke at the service, sharing memories and lessons learned from parents who had shown them what real love and partnership looked like. Thomas, now running the ranch successfully with his own children, placed a jar of wildflowers on his mother's grave, just like the ones his father had put in their cabin that very first day. It seemed fitting that Lillian's final resting place would have the same simple, heartfelt gesture that had marked the beginning of her new life all those years ago. The ranch continued for many more generations, growing and changing but always remaining a testament to the love story that had started it all. Nathan and Lillian's descendants spread throughout Nevada and beyond, but many always returned to visit the land where their ancestors had built something remarkable together. On clear nights, family members would sometimes stand on that same porch and look up at the stars, remembering the story of the mail-order bride who came expecting luxury and found something far more valuable. They would remember Nathan, the poor cowboy who had offered honesty and love instead of wealth. And they would remember that the best things in life often come disguised as disappointments, requiring courage and faith to recognize their true value. The love story of Nathan Rivers and Lillian Nash became legend in Empire City and the surrounding areas. It was a reminder that real love is not about what you have, but about who you are willing to become for each other. That partnership means working together through difficulties rather than giving up when things get hard. That sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards. And on quiet spring mornings, when the desert wildflowers bloomed across the hills, transforming the harsh landscape into something beautiful and soft, people would remember that love can bloom anywhere as long as two people are willing to nurture it together. The poor cowboy and the disappointed bride had proven that beyond any doubt, creating a legacy that would endure long after they were gone.